Yo, peace, you know the vibe. It's your man Fox. It's been a long time. The last time I recorded an episode was September 2021. Current Affairs presents The Death of God. And I'm going to tell y'all right off the top, anybody who thinks this is anti-religion or anti-God, you got it wrong. And that's what the title is meant to do. The title is meant to intrigue you and draw you in, right? So the death of God is going to explain how God is no longer a necessity to the establishment, including, but not limited to, the Catholic Church, right? And again, for those of you who are Catholic, do not take offense. The Vatican has nothing to do with the Catholic religion, okay? The Vatican is a country. The Vatican has its own military, its own police, its own banking system. Nothing to do with Christ. And I'm going to break that down. And my mother is a devout Catholic. Y'all know that I'm a Muslim. My faith does not waver. Even if you atheist, you got to know there's something out there. There is an intelligent designer, the greatest knower. The greatest knower of all time is out there. Something is out there. So you can get fruit from this no matter where you believe, but this is uncensored, unadulterated. Today is November 20th. I waited for the last minute to record this. It's November 20th, 2022, because I wanted the most current issues to be brought into this as well. So I'm going to definitely touch on Kanye and Kyrie briefly, because this is an old conversation, right? Everything that you see, police brutality, injustice, Jews, these are old conversations, right? Social media will have you believing it's new. Oh, the real Jews are black. That's old, bro. We've been known that. Only people who don't know it are the people who pretend they don't know it. Everyone else knows it. All right? So we're going to begin with everything you've been told is a lie. Everything. Everything you learned in school, everything you've been told is a lie. And we have to start there so we could get to some common ground as to understanding what's going on. So let's begin with the Great Reset, the Great Reset of mind, body, and soul, right? Now, the Great Reset, we see what's going on. You had COVID that comes out of nowhere, or did it? Because Bill Gates, October 2019, laid it out in a simulation. So this man lays out COVID in a simulation. 4 or 5 months later, COVID's in full effect, right? They tell us it's a 2-week curve, right? That's it, 2 weeks. They know this whole thing is planned out. All of a sudden, there's new language, social distancing, right? Out of nowhere, in the supermarkets, there's stickers on the floor, all that. All of a sudden, we have a shortage. We have a shortage of masks. We have a shortage of hand sanitizer, paper towel, toilet paper. All lies, 100% lies. It's all been proven. Ventilators. We need ventilators. People are dying. We need ventilators. They're dumping them in Miami. Brand new ventilators right off a truck, dumping them. The whole thing was bullshit. So the Great Reset, we all smell something is coming. That's the purpose of me recapping COVID, right? But here's what I present to y'all. And we're going to go with facts that are easily researchable. Everything I'm going to tell you, some of the shit is shocking. Some of the shit you're going to be like, what the fuck? He bugging. Easily researchable. Any knowledge that I can't quote, that I can't source, I'm not going to discuss here, because then it's too easy for people to dismiss the whole body of work. So let's start with this. The oldest skeleton found is about 3 million years old, right? So the oldest skeleton was found in Africa, but now there's new information that the oldest is found in North America, right? But let's just go with Africa. 3.2 million years old, right? All the technology we have has come in the last 100 years. So think about this for a minute in terms of a reset. You trying to tell me that we was running around barefoot on horseback for 3 million motherfucking years? And then in the last 100, we get microwave, radio wave, we get TV, we get cars, we get airplanes, we get the internet, all the way up to the metaverse. where we're now creating an alternate fucking universe within the web. So 3 million years, nothing happened, but now in the last 100, all the technology is available. And I'm gonna tell you something else more interesting. All the technology that's been introduced in the last 100 years, it hasn't really evolved. In the 1960s, a flight from New York to LA was 6 hours. The flight is still 6 hours. They had electric cars 100 years ago. They had cars that run on water 100 years ago. Every time someone makes an electric car, they get killed. Check the history, easy. Elon Musk, he's a different breed. He came out with it right at the time that they're promoting electric cars. Tax benefits for electric cars. The movement is mandatory electric cars in the next 5 to 10 years. So you think it's a coincidence that Elon Musk comes up with it right when the movement is heading that way? I think not. I think not. So what I'm getting at is there has been resets before. Advanced civilizations, whether human or not, existed on this planet. The information is suppressed. Certainly not taught in school. School is a birth to work pipeline. Work or prison. Those are your two choices with school. Work or prison pipeline. We know that. Schools, the General Board of Education, owned, founded by the Rockefellers, however you want it. Complete foul doctrine. Complete fallacy. Not based on imagination, creativity. Inspiration is based on memorization. You get taught a lesson, you memorize it, you move on. None of it had any value. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. School, the value you get out of school is being socialized, experiences with other people. Same thing goes for college. As far as the information itself, it's worthless. You could Google any of that shit, which we're going to get into Ivy League schools and where they came from and why. But sticking on topic, this is not the first time we've been reset. There's no question. Let's just take Egyptians, right? Egyptians, super advanced technology. The pyramids actually shot electricity all over the world to other pyramids. Tesla, the real Tesla, Nikola Tesla, that's where he got the technology from, right? That's why Elon named the cars Tesla after him. But what you don't know, because that might sound crazy, like, yo, they shot electricity all over the planet. Yeah, is that there's over 500,000 pyramids on the planet. Many of them right here in the United States, and you'll never know about it. So the true history is suppressed. Pyramids that are identical to one another, not the ones in Egypt. They're rather unique. And again, I'm giving you the surface so you can easily research this. But there are pyramids in different corners of the world that are identical. So that tells you that people were moving around. You know what I'm saying? The Taino Indians of Puerto Rico, they were moving back and forth between PR and Venezuela, thousands and thousands of miles away, and all they had was canoes. How was that happening? Now, the people who control this planet, the people who unleashed that virus, they know the truth about everything. They know the truth about God, about creation. And, that's what pisses me off, that we're left to our own devices to figure out what's real, to figure out what we can accept, not accept, when the truth is out there. And that's what pisses me off personally. That's why this information is fascinating to me. But with all that being said, I want to get into something that's important for you to understand the powers that be and how they play. So I see a lot of famous people, right? Famous people, the Jay-Z's, the Rick Rosses of the world, Dr. Dre, Diddy, all these people, right? And they all have a blueprint to success. Rick Ross has really been in the forefront lately talking about business. But I want everyone to understand who's trying to model themselves after these guys. Every one of them sold dope. So while you're trying to model your business and look up to these guys, their foundation is dope. So you're never gonna get that business acumen unless you came from that life. And because these guys are popular and they move numbers, nobody will hold it against them. Now, Jay-Z we know sold dope. Dr. Dre maybe didn't sell dope, but Eazy-E did. Without Eazy-E, there could be no Dr. Dre. Puffy, I don't know if he slanged dope, but his father sold dope. Dame Dash sold dope, right? Rick Ross talks about selling dope. So he's poisoning you and yours. Whether he actually sold anything, Officer Ricky, I don't know, I don't care. But you get my point. Anyone else who sells dope is frowned upon. These guys are glorified, and y'all are looking to them for business advice, right? Then we look at corporate America, and we don't see corporate America as dope dealers. We don't see them as dope dealers. But yet and still, they sell dope in every way, shape, and form. Number one, they sell dope because their products are addictive. They put chemicals in products to make you dependent on them, whether it's soda, whether it's fast food, whatever the case may be. But more importantly, some of the companies still actually sell dope, as I'll touch on later. But you know, JP Morgan Chase, their boat got caught with 1.3 billion in cocaine, 2019. The Nestle Corporation recently in Europe, they took a shipment of 500 bricks at the coffee plant and it got intercepted, right? You never hear of these stories again. You never hear anyone held responsible, anyone going to jail. So let's get into a brief history real quick about the British East Indian Company. This was a company out of the UK, Britain to be exact, that distributed opium throughout the world. Okay, they had colonized areas of Vietnam. They had colonized areas of Vietnam and Afghanistan, which of course were poppy seed rich. And they distributed opium all over the world. And I'm going to tell you who was behind that. They were selling so much dope that there was actually the Opium Wars. The Opium Wars were between 1839 and 1856. They were importing so much opium to China. China was like, look, you stringing everyone out. We don't want the importation anymore. We just don't want it. They didn't give a fuck. They kept on banging and they went to war. And China lost every time. The British companies, which Britain, the United States, and the Vatican are all one. I'll touch on that later too. Those are the only three countries in the world. Everything else is a corporation owned by either other nations, entities. We'll touch on that. So they're flooding China with dope. China's like, we can't have it no more. And Britain actually takes over Hong Kong. And they're like, look, we're going to make Hong Kong separate from China. We're going to do a treaty that we're going to control it for X amount of time. You know, a few years back, they had to give it back, right? But this was all over opium. They don't tell you that. They don't tell you these companies are slinging dope. We're just left to these history lessons. His story, right? History is agreed upon lies. I believe it was Napoleon Bonaparte that said that, right? So while you're trying to model your business after these people and you're looking at corporate America like, man, this is how they do it in corporate America. And meanwhile, these are all dope dealers, every single one of them. And they get away with fucking murder. But if we get caught with dope, we're sent up the river. So this is the kind of playing field that you're on. These are the kind of rules. How could you win the game? You don't even know the rules. And that goes for any of us, right? But I'm going to give you more about that. So China loses control of the trading ports during the wars and the opium continues. So Britain had separated, like I said, Hong Kong from China, took over the ports to make distribution easier. Because you got to remember, there's no fucking laws. There's no Schedule 1, 2, 3 narcotics at this time. There ain't none of that. The Brits are running around with impunity, with the full backing of the Vatican. They're just moving around the planet doing what they want to do. So no one's going to stop them. There's no Coast Guards going to pull the boat over and say, you got dope on here. They're just doing what they want, destroying people, destroying countries, destroying communities. Don't give one fuck. So they continued to traffic all the way up to the 1920s. And I'm going to tell you the families behind this, and it's quite interesting because it leads right into the Kanye situation. So in America, you had the Russell family, and they rose to fame distributing opium through the British Indian Company, right? Their relationships. Now, these relationships, how did they grow? Did they pick up a phone that didn't exist, say, hey, we want to sell dope too? No, it was through marriages. Marriages, joining families. See, this is how they grew. Now, some of the wealthiest families were the Cabots and the Pierpoints, right? Now, what's interesting, you hear those two names doesn't ring a bell until you hear John Pierpont Morgan Sr. Morgan as in J.P. Morgan Chase. You feel me? So this is what I'm saying. Jamie Dimon, you got some fucking nerve having an opinion on Kanye when your foundation is dope. J.P. Morgan Chase, founded on opium distribution. You use slaves as collateral for loans in the early days, and your organization continues to traffic cocaine around the world with your ship. Why the fuck does Chase own ships? People will say it's an investment. Okay, it is an investment because that dope showed up. 1.3 billion showed up. Now, another interesting fact. So you have these American families that are growing with the British East Indian Company. They're all involved in trafficking. And now they get together and say, okay, we got to start forming some exclusive clubs, right? And one of the clubs they found is Ivy League schools. So here's what's ill about Ivy League schools. The average person, when they hear Ivy League school, they think prestige, right? You get the highest education. But Ivy League schools were not only founded by these opium peddling families, right? And again, easy to look up. But Ivy League schools were founded by a bunch of friends who just wanted an exclusive football club. They just wanted an exclusive sports program so they can compete against one another. Nothing more, nothing less. They didn't say we're going to set the highest standards in education. Now, they are high standards, but that's not the inception. The inception is, hey, we got an exclusive club and you don't. To be accepted here is an honor, and we're going to decide who gets in and who doesn't. That's all Ivy League means in this country. That's the foundation. Now, another interesting fact about these families, in 1833, they also founded Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones, as you know, is an organization that's like a secret society, college, and a lot of U.S. presidents have come out of Skull and Bones. So upon graduation, if you're a Skull and Bones member, you're given $200,000. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine the kind of head start these people have? We come out of college with school loans. They come out 200 grand ahead, liquid. It's interesting because you got to understand how the game goes so you understand what you're up against. In the New York Times bestseller by James Bradley, The Imperial Cruise, he breaks down how the Ivy League schools were founded in dope money and all the nefarious plots that these families have had moving with impunity throughout the United States. All right, so back to my point that everything you've been told is a lie, right? So we're going to talk about the CIA for a minute. The CIA is what I call a bastard organization because they report to nobody. You hear about the president getting briefed by the CIA. They're telling him what's going on. They tell him what they want to tell him. And that goes for any president, okay? I think COVID has shown us that if presidents did have power at one point, they certainly don't have it now, as social media literally banning a sitting president, which is preposterous. So, I mean, if you can't even have the power to be on social media, what power do you have, right? But the CIA doesn't answer to anyone. And they've had programs, all kind of programs over the years, and one of them was Operation Mockingbird. So Mockingbird is to control the minds, thoughts, actions, emotions of the people through the media. And media could mean anything, right? So what was interesting to me when I learned about Mockingbird is this. So I'm sure a lot of you heard of the Grateful Dead, Jerry Garcia. You know, they were a band that had a cult following that literally would just follow them city to city to city when they did concerts, and they always performed like original music. They didn't repeat music. They didn't just, spin their albums. It was like new material all the time. Shit was a whole wave. You know what I mean? I respect it. So if you look at photos of Jerry Garcia, he's always standing with a dude that he said was his A&R, right? Or some kind of record exec. Long story short, the Grateful Dead was associated with LSD, etc. So the dude standing next to him was a CIA agent. And that CIA agent would travel with them and make sure they was distributing LSD at all the concerts, right? This is all facts, easily researchable. Now you fast forward that to someone like Future. And I don't want to pick on Future, he's talented. But the same thing goes on. Future is allowed to sing and rap about drugs because that is the agenda. That is the agenda, okay? You can't say nothing about a certain ethnic group. You can't say anything that's even slightly offensive to anyone with a certain sexual orientation, right? You can't say nothing no more, but you could rap about drugs, especially prescription drugs, right? Like nothing, with no poisoning the whole motherfucking culture. There's not one piece of pushback, right? But when Kanye says, hey, these people control the whole industry and all black entertainers are tied to them for one reason or another, cancel his whole life. Right? But Future and other rappers, I'm just picking on Future because he's the biggest on that drug culture. This is all done by the CIA. This is allowed. This is how they control the masses, okay? Through music, through Hollywood, and through television, and now the internet, right? So this is what I mean by everything is a lie. So we're sold the package of freedom, right? People say, oh, land of the free, home of the brave, we're free, free, free. But explain to me how we're free when the first 5 years of your life, you're at home with your family, right? You were blessed enough to have a family. Then you go to school for 12 years or 16 years. Then you go into the workforce. The workforce, you have 2 weeks off per year. Then you work until you're 65, if you're lucky. Most people pass 70 because they need the money. And then you fucking die. So your whole life has been predetermined for you. And when you realize it, it's too late. How can that be freedom? Who came up with the idea of work to live? Like, in other words, if you don't work, you're not allowed to participate in society. That is not the intention God had for us when he gave us dominion over everything. You know what I'm saying? The world was created for people to enjoy. Our lives are all based on work. Our value is based on how much money you have. You know how many times I get introduced to people be like, yo, Fox, yo, he's a millionaire. I don't give a fuck. What kind of person? We don't give a fuck about millions of dollars. We did that. That's past tense. Don't introduce somebody to me. That tells me this motherfucker has such little value, they got to give you a financial statement. And again, it's the person introducing. Doesn't necessarily mean that person is like that, but this is the society we live in. And I'm in business, real business, so I like to share that with people. Because the people who follow me are mostly people trying to get in. They want to get in business. They want success. So I want you to know what goes on out here. And that's a big turnoff. So if you have somebody that's successful, don't introduce them as that. Let their value show in the type of person they are, not in their net worth. So another thing I want to mention that Edward Black wrote a book, and the book is called The War Against the Weak. And what he states in the book is that these families, these founding families in the opium business that I discussed, they were also the people who funded Hitler. And their ideals were that Jews, blacks, Asians, Hispanics, no one had any real value, and they should be basically ethnically cleansed, but over time, not just a mass murder. Over time, through miseducation, misinformation, through poor diet, through overconsumption. And these people make these plans hundreds of years out, which I'll touch on later in a letter from Albert Pike, right? They plan things hundreds of years out, which again makes an intellectual think, do these people have the technology, which I know the answer, to transplant their consciousness into a new body? What would make you want to change the future hundreds of years out if you're not going to be here? Skeptics will say because, they're children and this and that. No. Nobody gives a fuck about that. People are too selfish. The human condition is full of selfishness and greed. No one's going to make moves that are going to manifest 200 years into the future because of their children. They're just not. So are these people living that long? That's up to you to decide. But the technology's out there. Trust me. It's talked about now. What Elon Musk wants to do with interfacing humans with technology. It's fascinating. Something you should check into. All right. So back to how we've been lied to, etc. So I want to talk about slavery. Because slavery, to me, and I know it's a hot topic right now, but slavery has been presented in a way that promotes white supremacy. So when you go to school and you're a minority, everything is presented to you from a Eurocentric perspective. Now, the teachers, you can't blame them. All they did was go to school to get a job. They're not saying, I'm going to teach my class from the Eurocentric perspective. The curriculum does that. So the first thing about slavery that's fucked up is when you're in a class of mixed race children, meaning different ethnicities, and you start talking about slavery, you already just started a class system. You already started the trappings of supremacy, because the children who are not black, or even if they have black and don't identify with black, or even if they're Caribbean, Afro-Caribbean, don't know their history, right? Whoever doesn't associate with being black is going to feel superior. And the children of color are going to feel like shit. Now, the thing with slavery is there was all kind of races that were slaves. There was white slaves, but they don't touch on that. So now you got this awkward scenario in the classroom. And we've seen it 100 times in the news. They're, doing a slave trade reenactment. And if you want to see a slave trade reenactment, watch the NBA draft. That's a slave trade reenactment. They reenacting it right in your motherfucking face. Straight like that. Straight music. You know what I'm saying? And they got you in shackles, and the main shackle's on your motherfucking mouth. Because we see with Kyrie, if you even have a fucking opinion, you're not even allowed to watch a movie. And then you see, the clownery with Shaq, Shaquille O'Neal, incredibly disappointed. Incredibly disappointed. And then Charles, Big Uncle Barkley, all that motherfucker care about is white pussy. He's so dumb in real life, he shouldn't even be on TV. He just care about white bitches. Anything that goes against the white bitch narrative, he gonna attack you. Fuck you, Charles Barkley. On God, you a fucking bird. You know what I'm saying? Fuck you 2 times, man. Y'all left Kyrie out to dry, and he's a good motherfucker. So back to slavery. So all this talk about slavery and the African ships and all this, and they're teaching this. Now, meanwhile, when you become a little older and you say to yourself, I want to know what's really going on, you take slavery and you look at their accounts. By their own accounts, 3 to 5% of slaves came over on the boat. 3 to 5%. The rest went to the Caribbean and all the way down to South America, Brazil, etc., right? So if only 3 to 5%, how did everybody else get here, right? So again, if you study, chances are what we call African Americans today were already here. They was already here. Makes total sense. And we're going to touch way more on that when we get into the real Jews. But, so chances are everybody was here already, right? 3 to 5% come over here. But I got one better for y'all. The slave ships. We've all seen the slave ship pictures where it shows, like 300 people on the bottom deck. They're all shackled and tied up, and they're in this oval, right? And they're coming over. Now, the ride over there from Africa to the North America, from what I understand, is like 3 months. So I just want to know who was feeding, cleaning shit and piss of all the slaves that they felt were inferior for 3 motherfucking months. Now, I'm not saying it didn't happen. That's not what I'm saying at all, because obviously people moved around. But who was cleaning that piss and shit and feeding them? Motherfuckers are shackled. I don't know, but it's something to think about. So now you got this slavery taught in school. People have been fighting for justice and equality since slavery. They have this notion, right, that slavery ended and now we're dealing with white supremacy. But white supremacy is not actionable. You need co-conspirators. So what I mean is, if you walk up to somebody who's a white supremacist, 3 brothers run up on him, what's popping? You a white supremacist? Yeah, I hate blacks, I hate, okay, so do that. Do it. Exercise supremacy. Because we'll break your shit, motherfucker. What's he gonna do? It's not actionable. You need co-conspirators. You need the media. The media shows unarmed black people getting clapped every day. Then you see cops getting off. That's a commercial for white supremacy. You need that. You see court cases where you have a black teenager who gets 7 years, then you have a white teenager, same crime, gets probation. These are commercials for white supremacy, but they're isolated incidents, because my partner is a lawyer. We know what goes on in court. They're not giving white people breaks like the media wants you to believe. That's how you promote white supremacy. That's not reality. They're giving these white kids fucking football numbers. When you get caught with meth, football numbers. Heroin, football numbers. Ain't nobody getting off. The jails have to be full. There's only so many brothers that you could lock up, because there's more white people here than anything else. So they claim. So I just want y'all to understand how white supremacy works. You need co-conspirators to push the narrative. Another way is every black organization that rises is cut down, right? We already know Martin and Malcolm. We ain't even got to touch it. They was making traction, they killed them. Black Panthers annihilated the whole organization. Nation of Islam. They were like media darlings. The black Muslims. If you follow from the 60s, the black Muslims did this. The media loved them because it was hype. It sold newspapers, right? You see the Nation of Islam is quieted down because they banned Farrakhan from everything, right? So while they dismantle all black organizations all the way up to BLM, which again, that was a CIA op. Build them up, cut them down. That was an op. While they do that, they allow the Ku Klux Klan to operate with impunity. That's a co-conspirator in white supremacy. You're letting people know it's okay if they do it, not okay if you do it. But that's only because the information is public. They need to put it in your face. They put it in your face, you believe, when in actuality, it's a myth. Because white supremacy is all part of the agenda pushing. The people who are on top are not white. Hate to tell you. They're not white. And the people who push these agendas, it's so elementary, it's almost embarrassing to talk about. It's just to keep us separated and hating one another while they fuck us to death from every angle, every motherfucking angle, and rewrite history. You know what I'm saying? We living through this COVID shit, and we see how much bullshit it is, but if you look at what's written of COVID, all the lies are just repeated. So they do the same thing. So back to slavery. Past slavery, and you get to this whole African American thing, right? Now, you'll never hear me use the word African American unless my lack of use will offend an elderly person. But thank you, Jesse Jackson, for coming up with that bullshit African American. The reason why African American is so offensive to me is because Africa, first of all, is a continent, okay? It's a fucking continent. So it's kind of like, what a fucking disrespect, right? So when they used to call Obama an African American, I used to cringe because Obama is Kenyan American. His father's from Kenya. Africa's a country, and Obama let it ride because Obama is on the other side, bro. Obama's from the other team. He's not with us. So African American, what it insinuates is you have so little value and we give such a little fuck about you, we don't even know where you came from. We don't know what country you came from, so fuck you, we just give you the whole continent. That's what you're saying every time you say African American. It's so self-loathing and disrespectful, but yet they could tell you 6,000 years ago what the fuck Moses was doing. They could tell you what the Egyptians was doing. They can tell you about ancient Asia. They could tell you all types of shit, but they can't tell you 400 or 500 years ago what country people came from. Isn't that interesting? Because what I'm saying is they was already here. So you have this term African American that's not tied to any nationality or any country, right? So if you're born here, why are you not just American? You could just say, I'm black, I'm American, and I'm a black person. I'm American, I'm a brown person. No, the African American shit is to say this person was brought here through slavery. And because Africa is unknown, their origin will give them the whole continent, like X, right? So Malcolm X used the X because it was the unknown. He's saying, I don't know my real origins, I don't know my real last name, so I'm just gonna go with X. That's where that came from. And the same thing should go with this African American thing, because like I said, Africa is a continent. So why keep using the term when it's like there's no value in it? There's just no value in it. And people who come from the Caribbean, like Jamaicans, for say, you call them African American, you're gonna see. Because before they come over here, you can ask anybody West Indian, they say, stay away from the American blacks. Stay away from them. Because they're associated with troublesome people. So other people of color don't want that term. It ain't for them because they weren't brought to America through the slave trade. Because that's all African American means, is your origins are in slavery. And again, that plays into that white supremacy narrative. You see what I'm saying? So there's so many things that we're up against. So many motherfucking things that we're up against. But without the knowledge of it, you don't even know where to begin. All right, so back to the slavery shit and where I'm going with this. So check this out. So I'm off my African American thing. I needed to get that off my chest for a long time. So let's talk about slavery. So once slavery is abolished, they come up with all kind of laws and codes so that slaves would basically have no job and starve to death. We know that, right? But by 1913, 1920, in that area, the United States does two things. First of all, they come up with the women's lib movement, right? So I'm going to teach you how to double your business model. Everything that's bad for you, they make you want, right? So they tease you. They hold the carrot out in front of you, make you want it. For example, the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act came after 9/11, and it basically took away all your fucking rights to privacy. But patriot sounds patriotic. The CARES Act, right? This fucking jerk off Biden. The other one, the Anti-Inflation Act, which prints more money, which raises inflation more. So this is how they did it. So back in the day with the women's live movement, they were like, it's time for women to vote, and it's time for women to be able to work, and it's time for women to have their fair share and contribute to America and all that shit, right? And they had women marching in the street. And they were giving them victory, like, yeah, women are allowed to vote, yeah, we did it. Meanwhile, it was all planned because now the IRS is founded, and now instead of taxing the household one time, they're taxing the household twice because now your wife can work. So they done doubled the business model overnight. And this is what the fuck they do. So this is what they did with slavery. They said, look, we don't need slaves anymore. We don't manufacture cotton like we did, tobacco like we did. There's industrial revolution going on. There's other ways to do it. So instead of enslaving or re-enslaving blacks, let's just enslave everybody. Now, this conversation is within the context of the United States, because on an international level, it gets too crazy. It's too much information. So we're talking about the context of the United States. So they said, let's enslave everybody. We'll start corporations. We'll educate these motherfuckers that they need a job, and we'll move them right into our corporation. So the corporation became the cotton field. The master's house is in Washington, D.C. And the chains they got around you is debt. So instead of having slaves that you had to house and you had to feed, even though you was feeding them shit, and you had to clothe, instead of that, they just said, let's get everybody. We'll pay them enough so they got their own house, their own clothes, their own food, but we taxing ours. So if you work in America, you're taxing the 30 to 40% tax bracket. So 3 to 4 months out of the year, you work directly for the man. You think you're not a slave? 4 fucking months out of your motherfucking year, you working for free, and you think you free? You think the military protects your freedom? The military don't give a fuck about you. Motherfuckers in the military don't got no fucking idea what they're doing or why. They take orders. They're certainly not looking after your fucking freedom. Trust me, you don't have any fucking freedom. That's a fact. So now, why can't you just break the cycle? Why can't you say, man, fuck that. Fox is right. I'm a fucking slave. I'm leaving. Because they got them shackles on you. The shackles are student loan debt. Clink. Mortgage. Clink. Where the fuck you going? Car payment. Clink. You got kids. Clink. You got to pay property taxes. You're obligated to all this debt and you're buried in it, and them chains and them shackles is on your motherfucking ass. So now how do we keep the people from revolting? We're not the only smart motherfuckers. Motherfuckers are going to figure it out. They're going to say, man, we slay. Let's fucking roll on these motherfuckers, because there ain't no fucking unity. You see? They cannot get us to get along, to unify, because they've poisoned each and every community against one another. Each and every one. Poisoned against each other. And the media and Hollywood give you the images of what that's supposed to look like, and we reenact it in real life. Think about it. Every motherfucking thing you know came from school or Hollywood. For example, we would come home after school, we would watch shows, whatever. You see the family, 5 o'clock, everyone's sitting down to dinner. I know I didn't grow up like that. I don't know nobody who grew up like that, where every night you could sit down to dinner, the whole family. Motherfuckers had different schedules, all that shit. You know, those of us who grew up in single-parent household. Hollywood said we came from broken homes. Did anyone ever say, oh, you come from a broken home? No. Hollywood showed you the pain that children suffer and things that can happen in a single-parent household. They showed us that shit. Same thing with derogatory terms around homosexuals, right? People forget, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, calling someone a faggot, whatever, that was regular. That was from TV. And when we said it, we didn't mean sexual orientation. When we were young, we were like, ah, man, you a little faggot. That just meant you acting like a little girl. Nothing to do with sex, but where did we get it from? Nobody in my household used the word faggot. In my crib, Spanish was the primary language. Till my parents got home. I was raised by my grandmother, right? I never heard her call anybody a faggot derogatory. Never. These are things we got from images coming through our television set, images on the big screen, and then our friends were also influenced by the same images, the same language, and this is how it gets around. Now all of a sudden, the same people who used to promote this kind of negative terminology, derogatory, inflammatory, these same people now are behind the LGBTQ. Now they're pushing the agenda. Now you can't say faggot, can't say homo, you can't say anything, because they say, but these are the same people that pushed the anti-agenda years ago. And that's something I want to discuss in a minute about the LGBTQ. because I'm just confused as to why they want you under one umbrella with all these other things that have nothing to do with sexual orientation. And why would you want to be under an umbrella with people who really are not like you? And when you say I represent LGBTQ, and I'm not being facetious, do you have a membership? Is this something that you actually join? Are there any benefits to joining? Do they do anything for you? And if so, right? If so, how much of your voice can influence the movement? How is it that a movement that just represents, hey, freedom, I don't want to be persecuted for who I am, which I'm with, but how do you get into the stores and it's only the children's section? How is LGBTQ shit on cereal? How is it in Macy's? How is it in Target, the big department stores, but only in the children's? Because that's the indoctrination. When you want to change the way a society thinks, when you want to do the great reset, you got to start with the kids. Because if it's normal for kids, then they grow up, it's normal for adults, and they're going to raise their children, et cetera, et cetera. And this is how they indoctrinate you into anything they want you to believe. Through the youth, through the images, and no longer TV, but TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. They're going after the kids, and now the school. You see in Illinois, they passed a law that said if a child wants to transition, it supersedes the right of the parent. So if a child says, hey, I'm a boy, I want to be a girl, I want the drugs, the school is allowed in Illinois to start administering the drugs without the parent's consent. Now, it pisses a lot of people off. They say it's never going to happen. Fuck that, fuck that, fuck that. But see, we're so lost and fucked up. When you have a child and you sign that birth certificate, you're signing the child over to the system. And the law states that you are a temporary or suitable custodian, but your rights to parenting can be revoked at any time, and the state supersedes any parental rights over you. When you sign that birth certificate, that's what you give up. Same thing with a marriage certificate. The child is considered the fruit of the corporation. So when you have a marriage certificate, it's a contract. And in that contract, there's fruit, the fruit of the children. The state owns the fruit. You can say, fuck that, that's bullshit. You could say all that, the fact remains. This is why the schools can do this. But here's the thing, and it goes back to the title of this discussion, The Death of God. If children can decide what sex they are, right, out of no fucking way, because this was never an issue before, and transgender makes up less than 1% of the population, right? And that's a lot of the reason why they joined with the gays. And I say they, I mean the powers that be. LGBT, lesbian, gay. They said we need numbers. This will never fly, just transgender, because there's not enough people. So we need to group them together to make a movement. So when you're saying that children can choose what sex they are, that means what? That God made a mistake. And once you start questioning the Almighty, what power does he have? What power can God have if you're now saying God makes mistakes? And this is where the movement is going. So back to the taxes and that whole wave. How are you content? So let's say, because they covered all bases. So let's say you come into the knowledge, right? And you like, yo, fuck this. I'm selling my house. Fuck these school loans. Fuck everything, right? I'm getting out of the system, right? I got a saying. I got two sayings. Number one, Uncle Sam wants your physical. The church wants your soul. So in other words, there's two sets of laws here. There's the law of God and there's the law of man. And both are meant to restrict you, right? They're meant to restrict you. Uncle Sam wants your physical, the church wants your soul, and another one, everybody loves God, nobody wants to meet him, right? So in other words, if you love God and heaven is so great, why don't you just leave the planet? I'm going to tell you why. Because Scripture, the way it's spoken to us, promises everything in the afterlife. So if you were to leave the planet now, maybe you don't have enough on your resume to get in the pearly gates. Because the pearly gates are promised to those who do right, to those who are neighborly, to those who are charitable, to those who were a good soldier of the Lord, for lack of better terms right now. So everything is promised in the afterlife. So when you get furious with this life, you say, man, let me just focus on being a good person because my blessing is coming after death. I got news for you. That's cap. That's cap. You don't know what's coming after death. You don't know what's coming. But they have to pitch it like that so that you're content with what you have right now. You see what I'm saying? So all your riches, everything you want, they promise in the afterlife, which you have no knowledge if it's ever coming. So if you look at the commandments, look at the 10 commandments, right? The 10 commandments get in the ass, yo. And I'm going to keep it real. I heard Paul Mooney say this, and he wasn't, and you know, he's controversial now. God rest the dead. But the 10 commandments puts the foot in the ass of man. Everything man wants, lust, greed, this and that. But my point to you is, if God created us with lust in our hearts, if God created us to want to curse, maybe not curse his name, but, you know, want to steal, want to kill, which the powers that be steal and kill every day, right? Why would God create us this way? Why would he create us with this is our nature? And then Moses brought law, Jesus brought grace. Why would Moses then want us to reject what's in our hearts? It's obvious, because they were taking away your freedom little by little, little by little. Every pleasure that God gave us, freedom, we have none, we have to work. Sexual freedom, all of a sudden this theory of monogamy comes into play. Like, where does it say you got to be monogamous, right? The Bible talks about marriage. The Quran, you can take on other wives as long as every household is taken care of. But the theory that sex is a sin and monogamy is where it's at, it goes against the nature of man. I used to argue about this with my ex-wife, that I would say, you know, a man with a high sexual drive, you know, you got to argue that out with God, because God made man with a high sex drive to ensure population of the planet. If he made men with a lackadaisical sex drive, and as soon as you marry a woman, you already know how that go, you ain't getting no buns, there would be no reproduction. Some women have a high sex drive. The purpose is, when God created us, right, or whomever you call God, he created us so that fucking never stops. There's constantly the temptation to fuck. And if you fucking, you're going to produce children. Period. So a man that is unfaithful, does he really want to go out and cheat? Does he want to hurt his wife? Does he want to hurt his children? Does he want to bring pain because of a natural desire? He's supposed to control himself, etc., etc. But either way, either you're going against the nature of man or the nature of God. Because if he controls himself, he might not reproduce. If he doesn't control himself, he's fulfilling his own desires, but then he's hurting the people that he loves. It's a fucked up scenario, all pitched by this notion of monogamy, which again, they sold us that bag of goods. You think 2,000-3,000 years ago, people were getting a marriage certificate, raising children together, and being monogamous? These motherfuckers was having orgies. They was enjoying their life. In the Bible, Solomon has 700 wives or whatever. You feel me? But here's how I bring it into full circle. So when you look at the powers that be, you look at the global elite, and you look at the like Jeffrey Epstein was not a global elite, but he was down with them, give or take, not with the top brass. But these people, the Clintons, all that, they're running around fucking and sucking everything that moves, children included, while they tell us to be monogamous, while they got us in divorce court losing it all because you got some pussy. You see the brother from the Celtics, got some pussy from a white bitch, lost his job, all that. What the fuck part of the game is that? So now you can't be employed if you fucking, and I don't give a fuck about company policy. I know corporate America in and out. I don't give a fuck. People in corporate America in the highest places fuck, and everyone overlooks corporate policy. Okay? They wanted to make an example out of this brother. They smeared him. They smeared his woman, and they protected the white girl like usual. But you get my point. The powers that be are going around doing everything that the commandments tell us not to. But that's how they live their life. All right, so I want to touch back with the 10 Commandments and why God would design us in a way where our inner desires go against the commandments. Why would he put us in a battle? Now, a lot of clergy, people of faith, will say, well, God gave us free will. So it's up to you whether to do right and wrong. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in free will for a variety of reasons. But let's talk about Adam and Eve. Right? Did Adam have free will? Because allegedly in the story, Eve is the one who ate the apple. She violated God. And then she told him to take a bite. So he was just being supportive of his woman. But I'm going to keep it real. The story of Adam and Eve is a story of seduction. And it goes back to what I say about populating the planet. So when the snake, the devil, however you interpret the story, when he was in Eve's ear, what that tells me is don't turn your back on your woman. Because women are meant to be seduced. And they even use that term, that the snake seduced her. Women are meant to be seduced. Why? Because we have to populate the planet. If women just fell in love with one man and never looked at another man, and that man decide, I'm not attracted to you no more, I'm moving on, what's she gonna do? No. That's why some women you date, you'll date a woman maybe 2 months, 3 months, you're not getting no buns, right? You finally hit it, whatever. Then a year later, you found out she slept with some dude she met in one day. That's what the story of Adam and Eve is about. Protect yours. Protect your woman. Don't turn your back. It's not about violating God. Because when Eve was getting seduced, where the fuck was Adam at? There ain't nobody on the goddamn planet. Where the fuck is he at? Hunting? They were in the Garden of Eden. They had everything at their fingertips. Where was Adam in the story? Now, the story is metaphorical, right? The irony is that's the hardest story in the Bible to believe, because if Adam and Eve started creation, that means there was incest to get us all here. But the truth is, it did start with 2 people. That's proven through DNA. So every man and woman on this planet right now is walking around with markers from Adam and Eve. DNA markers, that's a fact. But you get my point. They've been selling us games since day one. So the notion that we have free will is not exactly something that I can buy, because we're influenced by so many different things. We're socially engineered through media, through music. Whatever the music is talking about, the culture, is what's happening in society. Look at hip-hop. I'm sad to say that I've almost resigned myself from hip-hop, something that was a big part of my life. I had a record deal when I was a kid. I made a lot of money. But after Nipsey was killed, it really took my heart out of it. I was like, yeah, nah, fuck this. And now I see every single record, especially now that I'm living in the Chi, every single record is murder, 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 kill, kill, kill. And all you see is rappers dying. You know, I told my kids a couple years ago, I said, you know what's ill? All my favorite rappers from when I was a kid are in their 50s and 60s, and they're on tour. Slick Rick, EPMD, Rakim, you name it. Big Daddy, they still do shows, and it's fun, because you could go there without worrying about being killed. I said, all y'all favorite rappers are dead already. You know, Lil Peep, Juice WRLD, there's a million rappers that are dead, man, but there's one, what's the dude's name, the white rapper? Short white, he died from an overdose.
Well, we got XXX.
No, XXXion, dead.
XXX.
Yeah, that's all right. But the white boy, man, he was dope. Mac Miller. Like, all my kids' favorite rappers are dead. And that goes to show you, Pop Smoke, right? It goes to show you how fucked up this shit is. You know what I mean? We dance to our own demise. Adults too. When older motherfuckers go to the club, they not playing no adult contemporary. They playing the same records that the little kids dance to. And it sound good. And we all dancing to it. But the lyrics are destroying us from the inside out. Our communities, our bodies, our minds, our soul is pure poison going in, and we steady dancing to it. You feel me? All right, so continuing on with the Adam and Eve wave and love and monogamy in marriage. So scientifically, love, when you fall in love with somebody, it is an actual event. Love is an event of the mind. And what happens is you release dopamine, and that dopamine feels good. And that's that puppy love. When you were younger, you get around somebody you like, you got butterflies in your stomach, all y'all want to do is get alone, the fuck and all that. That euphoric feeling of love, especially that innocent love, because you don't have a job, you don't got to do nothing but wake up and link up with this person. But that euphoric feeling of dopamine only lasts 7 years. So again, this is intelligent design, because in 7 years, that gives you plenty of time to get to know one another, to trust each other, to have children, and move on. Now, we're not talking about in structured society. We're talking about scientifically what love is. So after 7 years, the dopamine release begins to slow down, and you're looking at things through a different lens. And that's why you hear in marriages the 7-year itch. Like after 7 years, if you can make it past 7 years, the marriage is going to work. Yeah, but the thing is, you're forcing yourself because you no longer have that feeling. Some people can stay in love forever. I understand it, right? But me being an intellectual and a logician, I look at things logically. The 7-year theory makes a lot more sense. It makes a lot more sense. So this notion of monogamy, this notion of marriage and being together forever is simply a notion. And then they built businesses around it, like I explained, child support, divorce, all the lawyers, judges that come with that. That's all a business. So I want to touch on Kanye and Kyrie real quick. And I'm going to tell you why the conversation is kind of moot to me. But back in the day when hip hop had a lot of value, right? And KRS-One had a song which says, Shemp was a black man in Africa. If you repeat that fact, they can't laugh at you. That lyric right there opened my mind to want to study. And I was a young man at that point, like in my teens, and I took off with that. So that lyric right there led me to the truth. So the fact that we're still discussing it 30 years later is crazy. If you look at the descendants of Shem, they were black, right? And you can argue that if you want. Now, the greatest Jewish scholars do not argue that. Why? Because they're intelligent. And in 1995 at Duke University, they did a study to prove, are these South Africans called the Lemba tribe, are they really Jews? Because they were writing and saying, hey, we the real Jews, man. And we trying to go to Israel because that's our right. And that right is called the right to return because it's biblical. So the occupation of Palestine, the illegal occupation of Palestine, is based on biblical entitlement to the land. So the black Jews like, hey, that's us. So Duke University goes out there and does a test of their DNA, and they come back with the Y chromosome. The Y chromosome is the high priest chromosome, and these people are direct descendants of Aaron in the Bible. So my point is, this shit is proven. And this is really more for Kyrie, because Kyrie was saying, hey, this movie opened my eyes, it's ill. And it talks about who the real Jews are. So it's already proven. So the people who come out and go to war are Zionists. Zionists are people who believe in the illegal occupation of Palestine, known to y'all as Israel. They have their own agenda. They don't practice Judaism. They don't believe in God, but they believe in this bloodline that they come from. So what I'm telling y'all is the conversation is moot. It's a witch hunt against Kyrie, and fuck the NBA, fuck the commissioner, fuck David Stern. I remember when David Stern was a commissioner, I would take my kids to basketball games. They're playing hip hop with the curses in it, but he told the basketball players, y'all can't dress hip hop no more. Everyone want to come, all right, cool, come in suit. Fuck you, David Stern. Don't play hip hop at the games then, motherfucker. Don't cherry pick the parts of the culture you want and discard the rest. Fuck you. And the new bald head motherfucker looks like he got AIDS, fuck you too. I don't even know your name because sports and all that shit is fucking irrelevant to me. You know what I'm saying? So as far as the black Jews, it's been proven. Duke University, 1995 study. Check it out for yourself. And the Jewish scholars know this. So who's really bickering here? Now, as far as Chase Bank not wanting to do business with Kanye, J.P. Morgan Chase, founded in opium distribution, continues to sell coke to this day. Also used to take slaves as collateral for loans. Where the fuck do you get off, Jamie Dimon? I respect Jamie Dimon. Fuck you. Adidas, founded by two Nazis who sanctioned the murder of Jews. Founded by two Nazis. Where the fuck do you get off? Where do you get off? Now, because the world is so corrupt, I'm not going to tell you I'm going to stop wearing Adidas. I don't give a fuck. I'll go buy 20 pair of shells right now. I never bought Yeezys because it's not my thing. However, I've never bought a pair of Jordans in my life. I've had 2 pair of Jordans my whole life. 2 pairs, did not buy them. But I didn't buy Jordans because I've had a political mind since a young man. And in New York in the 80s when Jordans came out and Adidas shells were $29 and suede Pumas were $29 and the Jordans came out 100 plus, they were killing motherfuckers over the Jordans. Like not even run the sneakers, just running up, boom, and taking the sneakers. And because Jordan and Nike didn't have anything to say about it, I said, man, fuck y'all. And Michael Jordan is a dick in real life. If any of y'all ever met him, you can ask Sha Millionaire about him. The motherfucker who sung Riding Dirty. Jordan is a fucking real cocksucker in real life, dead ass. So I never fucked with his brand, never have, never will. I won't boycott Adidas because if I boycott Adidas, look at all the other racist brands I have to deal with when it comes to food, when it comes to anything, banking, right? I bank with Chase. What the fuck I'm gonna do? I'm gonna leave because Kanye? Fuck Kanye. Fuck every billionaire. Them motherfuckers ain't helping me. But I just want you to see the hypocrisy. The hypocrisy. And all these Jews come out. Why don't the Jews, right? Because the Jews love to tell somebody black, I need you to visit the Holocaust Museum. Why don't you come to the projects and visit the current fucking Holocaust that never stopped? Do that. Go to the fucking projects and look what your forefathers did with the financing of slave ships and your hand in the slave trade. Look what manifested from that. Why don't y'all visit history and look at the singers? 1927, the jazz singer Al Jolson performed in that movie in blackface. Jewish baseball teams, the Hebrew All-Stars, used to host baseball games with the Ku Klux Klan. Why don't y'all visit that? You got 2 ethnic groups of people that have been discriminated against, that have been demonized, and that suffered a Holocaust. The Jews suffered a Holocaust that is documented in history and talked about and apologized for to this day. The motherfucking Jews got billions of dollars in reparations. The African Holocaust, so-called African, because I'm saying black people are indigenous to North America. I'm standing on that. But the African Holocaust continues to this day with no reparations. And there'll never be reparations. They'll never be because your enemy is never going to give you comfort. Your enemy is never going to put you on your feet. And even if he did, he would do it when the money had no value. Trust me on that. Because look, we're at the end of paper money. We're going into crypto and there's been no reparations. But to the Jews who feel that every time someone has an opinion on y'all that you need to visit the Holocaust Museum, we saw all that shit in school. You need some cultural sensitivity, motherfucker. You fucking need it. You need to go visit and stare down in the eyes what the actions of your forefathers did. That's what you need to do. So you can understand people are allowed to have a fucking opinion about you. All the rest of us get shit on every day. Muslims get shit on every day. Hispanics, blacks, poor whites. That's another notion about white supremacy, that everyone white have money. You in the hood, oh, you know them white motherfuckers got money. What money? A fucking job? A fucking job in a house, that's what money is? Motherfuckers is poor as shit. And poor white people, what they call white trash, which I hate that term, they get shit on every day, B. Every motherfucking day they get shit on. So I don't understand where the Jews, when you have an opinion on them, how they form fucking Voltron and want to cancel people. Because we have the power to cancel them. But the Puffies and the Jay-Z's and the LeBron James of the world, they're quiet as a motherfucker. Because they know them Jews will take their position away also. So it's a fucked up debacle. It's a fucking conundrum. It's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Another thing that Zionist leadership needs to look into before they send brothers to the Holocaust Museum, look into the rabbis. I have rabbi friends that as soon as they're alone with some thug motherfuckers, first thing they want is black hookers and ribs. That's on God. They want to eat pork. They want to fuck black hookers. That's on God. So I'm telling you that there's a sect in the Jewish religion that performs circumcision and then they suck the penis of the child. So you explain to me what the fuck that is before you send people to the Holocaust Museum. In New York State alone, there's 2 deaths because, like I said, the rabbis, they love the pork, they love the prostitutes. So because they had herpes, they sucked the penis of the child and the virus overcame the child and the child died. More than one occasion, 2 in New York alone. Look the shit up for yourself. Then you go to the fucking Holocaust Museum. Stop sending motherfuckers. You're not the masters. You tú no manda. You understand what I'm saying? You don't call shots. Okay, boom. Now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes here. Now, I had intended this to be a 40-minute monologue. We probably got 6 hours of footage. I'm going to try to cut it up. It's probably going to be 4 or 5 pieces. So I'm going to tie in the Catholic Church. We're going to get into the LGBTQ agenda, and we're going to get into why God is no longer needed, right? Because we're moving towards a genderless future. Motherfucking Stevie Wonder could see that, right? So boom. The Catholic Church, don't nothing move without the Catholic Church. Nothing. And I'm going to break the shit down heavy. And I went off the top all this time. I got notes because it's so heavy. I got to get every word of this. And every word, remember, I'm not fucking with no information on this monologue that you can't go find for yourself easily. The heavy shit is for another day when I have time to give you my sources, right? And no matter what I give you, there's somebody out there that's going to say it's contrary, and they're going to come with their sources. But we're going to run with this. So the Catholic Church. There's only 3 countries in this world, also known as corporations. They each have their own flag. They have the phallus from Egypt. The one in Rome is actually stolen from Egypt. The phallus represents the penis and the vagina. Why the Vatican would need that, you tell me. We have it in DC also. 3 corporations, 3 countries known to the rest of the world as cities. And that's Vatican, has its own banking, its own money, its own military, its own police, pays no taxes. City of London. City of London is not London like when you take a trip to London. City of London is 1 square block. It houses the Rothschild Bank. It houses so much shit. I'm going to give you the actual list, right? So you got the Vatican, you got City of London, and you got DC. The City of London is the only plot of land in the world that has no title because they don't need it. They run their own shit. The Catholic Church and the black nobility families are on the top of the pyramid. Okay, you got the white pope that we know, the gray pope, and the black pope. The Jesuits is a secret society of the Vatican that does their bidding, does their dirty work. The Queen of England, which is now passed, she is subordinate to the church, but she's on top. Then you have the Zionists, and then you have some global elite families, right? But that's the chain of command. So what's crazy about it is the Catholic Church is the most powerful organization in the world because of real estate. They have 177 million acres, right? Pretty strong. I'm going to explain to you how they got that. But the Queen of England has 6.6 billion acres. The only person or entity, because she's gone and it moves on, it continues on, that actually owns entire countries. Straight own the land in entire countries. And again, I'm going to explain how they did that. So, when I was a kid, and I was in Catholic school, and I was a good little Catholic boy, which was never, I did believe firmly in what I was told, right? My mother's a devout Catholic, my grandmother's Catholic, it all made sense. I went to Catholic school, right? But one time I was in the mall and I saw a guy, probably in the late 70s, early 80s, and the shirt said, God didn't create man, man created God. And I was like shocked, because I'm like, who the fuck would have the audacity to be so blasphemous? Because, I was scared of God, because all they teach you is hell, 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 the hellfire, right? That's all they teach you. So I was scared, and I told my mother, and she was like, look, everybody has their opinion. It is what it is. He's probably an atheist. And that's the first time I heard that word. So boom, what's that? Somebody don't believe. All right. But when you get older and you do the knowledge, right? When you do the knowledge, the God that we know, the God that the majority of the world knows, the God that came out of a book, the God whose message was delivered by man, in essence, man did create God. Because God has never spoken to the world as a mass message. He's spoken to people. He's spoken to prophets. So Moses got the word, right? Then Jesus came. Then you have Muhammad, peace be upon him, who got the word of God through the angel Gabriel, right? So the religions were created by man. So in essence, in retrospect, that shirt and that guy, they had a point. So if man created God or religion, because no scripture speaks of actual organized religion, but if man created it, then man can destroy it. And man will destroy it when he has no use for it. And the Catholic Church is so powerful and involved in so many worldly endeavors. Even if you eliminate God, they'll go on. And what people need to understand is the Vatican is actually Rome. Rome never fell. Rome has never fallen. It has always remained, and we pay homage and we pay taxes to them to this day. Now, some of the things about the Catholic Church that people don't know. Number one, there's not a war that's gone on that they haven't sanctioned, right? So this is what's so sad about the military. Like, people who go to the military and military families that believe in this country and fighting for freedom, and these motherfuckers will kill you over this shit. Like, if you tell them, son, you straight got hoodwinked, the whole shit is gas, and you got your legs blown off or your face blown off for nothing, you could find yourself in serious shit, all right? Because motherfuckers have been indoctrinated heavy. But the truth of the matter is, most of the guys in the military now know it's gas, right? Guys I know that were in Iraq making $18 an hour, their wife is at home getting fucked, you know what I'm saying? And then they're protecting Halliburton guys that are making $300 and $600 an hour right behind them. So they know it's bullshit. They know it's political war games, and that's what I'm saying. So we've all heard of Hunger Games, right? And people say, oh, the elite, they bring, runaway people to the island, like Jeffrey Epstein type. These underprivileged kids, they bring them to the island and, they have sex with them, whatever, and then they hunt them. And whoever kills the kid wins. That shit does go on. That shit does go on. FBI, CIA, they'll tell you that. People in Hollywood will tell you that. But the bigger picture is the controlling families, the global elite, they use war as Hunger Games. They literally watch the pawns. We're the pawns, right? Go to war, kill each other, and they fund both sides of the war. And they laugh at us. It's literally a fucking game for them. And it's also mass death. And I don't want to get too heavy into satanic worship in this particular presentation, but we got to touch on it because everything I'm telling you is related to worshiping and following protocol of satanic worship, right? So, sacrifice is part of satanic worship, right? We've heard back in the day, the Mayans used to sacrifice, and this one was sacrifice. The Bible is full of sacrifice. It has never stopped. It's just hidden from the mass population. So war is a chess game for the global elite. Forget rich. Forget any concept of money you have. Who's a billionaire, who's not a billionaire, Kanye, a billionaire one day. But we're talking about the people who print the fucking money. So what's a king to a god type of vibe? You print the money, okay? The central bank families, you can't even express the kind of money they have. These are the kind of games they play, and they play them for fun. And the Catholic Church has been right there all along. The Catholic Church sanctioned the concentration camps. So I don't understand why whenever someone says something about anybody Jewish, the anti-Semitic rhetoric comes out when there are so many other entities who have done greater harm, and yet it goes unchecked. So I want to break down how the Catholic Church became so powerful and why they're bogus. Now, again, if you're Catholic and you go to church and your family goes to church, we're not talking about the worship of Jesus. We're talking about the Vatican. And the Vatican, like I said, has its own military, its own police, its own banking. They pay no taxes. The Vatican has laundered money for the Italian mafia. Why? Because they don't have to deal with regulators. They don't have to deal with banking compliance. Okay? So the Catholic Church has made a bunch of bogus changes that I didn't agree with. So in the Council of Nicaea, 325 AD, they made a whole bunch of changes. So they met for like 3 or 4 months, and some of the things they did was they removed books from the Bible, right? They removed content from the Bible, one of which Jesus talks about reincarnation, right? That will blow a lot of people's mind, like, what? So Jesus actually spoke about reincarnation, and they removed that book from the Bible. What's interesting, there was a Russian who wrote a book called The Case for Jesus. He was an atheist, and he was so turned off. Okay, I don't want to use the word disgusted, but he just was so turned off by the notion of Jesus and how people worship him. He set out to prove that Jesus was a lie, that Jesus never existed, because it's very hard to find evidence of Jesus in secular history. Josephus, which was a historian, he had mentioned Jesus. That was later proved to be a false document, right? So very little secular history of Jesus. Spiritual, yes. Secular, no. So he set out to prove Jesus was fake, and he travels to Asia, okay? Up in the mountains, India, with the highest priest in Hinduism, right? And these people tell him, yeah, Jesus was here. Jesus came through. We gave him the whole spiritual game. He left enlightened. He was glowing. And he went back to his area to spit game, right? So I found this fascinating because I'm very young when I find this out. And then later on, I find books, Jesus and Buddha, where they take the sayings of Buddha and the sayings of Jesus and put them together, and they're identical. They're identical. So super fascinating. That would make up for all the lost years of Jesus. So this guy sets out, and again, A Case for Jesus, look it up, sets out to prove Jesus is wrong, winds up becoming a Christian, falls in love with the Christ that he tried to discredit. So it's fascinating. What you believe and what you don't, it really is irrelevant. The information itself is fascinating. Another thing that they changed about the Bible is the different gospels that were taken out or never included in the canonized Bible. So know this. A lot of people are like, I'm Christian, but I can't stand the Catholics for this, that, and the third, and whatever reason you have, right? But what I want to remind people, no matter what you feel about Catholics, they canonized the Bible. Whatever Bible you have right now that's different from the Catholic Bible is because it was changed by man. So you're still dealing with the canonized Bible. And the only Bible that predates the canonized Bible is the Ethiopian Bible of Christianity, right? So there was what's called the infancy gospel. And the infancy gospel was the gospel of Christ when he was a kid. And according to the gospel, he was a badass. He was disrespectful. He would scare adults by killing birds. He would kill 3-4 birds at a time and then bring them back to life. He would jump off of high places to scare people like he was going to die, but he would float down. the thing about the infancy gospel is they got these gospels from the same place they got the other gospels. So why would you exclude it or remove it? All types of gospels, all types of chapters of the Bible have been omitted, right? Me personally, I think that's bogus, right? Okay, one of the most important things that happened at the Council of Nicaea, or thereafter, or around, don't quote me on that because I'm only reading history, right? So there could be contrary information. What's not going to be contrary is the facts I'm giving. And that is, priests were able to marry, right? Priests at one time were able to marry. So the Catholic Church, because it's a nefarious plot from day one, right? It's a nefarious plot from day one. I tell you, they planned shit centuries out. They said, okay, priests are no longer able to marry. And not only are they not able to marry, but when they sign up for priesthood, upon their death, all of their worldly possessions come to us. That's how the Catholic Church acquired more property than any other entity. The Queen is not an entity. She is the biggest controller. What makes me laugh, people think Bill Gates and McDonald's own the most land. Bill Gates, 239,000 acres. McDonald's is like 50, 60 million acres. And then you have, no, McDonald's like 50, 60,000 acres. Nothing next to Bill Gates. Then you have the Catholic Church, 177 million. And then you have the Queen or the Crown, 6.6 billion. You feel me? So, this is how they acquired all the land, by changing that one rule. Now, because no one is stupid, they knew when they take away your right to marriage, they knew what would come. It's going to attract two types of people. It's going to attract priests who have no interest in women, priests who are asexual, priests who are sexually perverted, emotional or mental disorder. They know that because no man is going to give up his God-given right to have sex. And if you look at Leviticus, because the Catholic Church hung their hat on Leviticus where it says it's an abomination for a man to lay with a man, right? But if you look at Leviticus and you read it, Leviticus 20 all the way down, it says a man should not fuck one of his father's wives. A man should not marry a daughter and the mother. So what I'm telling you is if you look at Leviticus, it is polyamorous. The whole chapter is written contrary to monogamy. And this is what I said, monogamy was sold to us. Monogamy is not natural. So if it's not natural in our desire, if it's not natural in the word of God, where the fuck is it natural? It was sold to us. It's straight game. And the same goes for women. I'm not tripping like only men should be able. Women too. You get tired of the same old dick. Nigga eating this pussy the same old fucking way. You get tired of the shit. You need inspiration. You know what I'm saying? It's in the Bible. Don't argue with me. I want to talk about unwilling participants. I already talked about Luciferian worship a bit. Now, as disgusting as this may seem, it's going to make sense. And trust me, I take no pleasure. But part of Luciferian worship is the molestation of children and sometimes during different seasons, murder, right? So this is why you always hear about the global elite having sex with children. Now, I want to tell you what an unwilling participant is. So let's say you're a cop, chief of police. You walk in, what's up, chief? Hey, we got a big problem down there on Main Street. We got a motherfucking drug lord. There's 300 fucking bricks in there. They're fully armed and they're going to execute somebody tonight. I need y'all to go in there and just be blasting. Kick the door in, shoot everything moving. All right, chief. So you go, you kick the door in, lay everything down in the place. Then 6, 7 months later, you find out that that man that y'all killed was fucking the chief of police wife. And he basically played y'all out. So did you murder the man? Yes. Were you a willing participant? No, you didn't know. So this is what I mean about priests. So you take away a priest's right to marriage, so you know you're going to attract a certain type. Not every priest, but hear me out. You know you're not attracting regular, rational, heterosexual alpha men. You know you're not attracting that. So now you put these priests around children. All the Catholic schools around the world, right? And it happens over and over and over a fucking again. Now, the children that are being hurt, that's the sacrifice to Lucifer. Are they a willing participant? Did they say, hey, go out and hurt children so we can worship? No. They're an unwilling participant, but they're doing it over and over. Imagine if every McDonald's in the world, every McDonald's, there was a child that was raped there. Every single McDonald's. The people would bum rush the McDonald's and shut it down. The people. But yet, in every archdiocese around the world, there's been abuse. There's been abuse, and they're still around. And they use your money from tithing to fight these motherfucking criminal cases. And a lot of times, the Pope would make them go away. Even apologize for it, which is fucking disgusting. These kids and these parents trusted the church to educate their children, and instead you fuck them. You fuck kids. I won't have no part of that shit, and I don't give a fuck who don't like it. Because if you co-sign that, you co-signing fucking kids. Same people who will co-sign that will say R. Kelly ain't shit. Fuck is you doing? So let me tell you a couple things about, before we get into the heavy shit, because we about to get busy. But let me tell you a couple things that I felt was bogus about the Catholic Church and what made me revert to Islam. Number one, I struggle with the Holy Trinity, right? It's very clear in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt have no other God but me. None. So the Trinity was hard for me to understand. How can there be three? He said right here it's one. This is in the Torah Tanakh. This is the New Testament. Y'all got a New Testament. You put it on the back of the Torah. You called it the Bible. Like, is that a remix of the book? Kind of fucked me up. Also the Sabbath. They just conveniently moved the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday, which is pagan ritual. Every holiday on the Catholic calendar is a former pagan holiday. Why did they do that? Easy to convert people. So, hey, we don't even want you to go out your way. Don't go out your way. Just worship Jesus. Holidays all the same. Everything the same. All pagan holidays, every single one of them. Also, the rape of children. Now, in my case, you can look this up, Sacred Heart, Newburgh, New York, 70s and 80s. The principal of my school, Arthur Manzioni, he was a deacon. His brother was a priest. They molested children. They got bagged. There's a law firm out of Iowa that represented the victims in Newburgh. They got paid in full. Fucked up. And then, so that's what made me move away from Catholicism early, right? And then there is the line, and this is the illest shit in the world right here. Then there's the line in the Bible, Matthew 22:22, where Jesus says, in reference to tithing and taxes, give Caesar what is his and give the church what is theirs, right? And I said to myself at that moment, as a youngster, I said, wait a minute. How the fuck is Jesus Christ, who's supposed to be God in the flesh, Allah Almighty in the flesh, gonna be talking about earthly things? Wouldn't he be educating people on the meaning of life? Right? The afterworld, the world you come from before. Why is he talking about Caesar? And it made no sense until now. Until now, when I realized that Caesar is the Pope reincarnate, metaphorically speaking. That Rome never fell. So the church is saying, we eating at both ends. Don't play with our money. We eating at both ends, and I'm going to break that down right now. I'm going to get right into it. So here's the illest shit you're going to hear. So the Catholic Church, and this is apropos for the current times because this is current affairs, and as you know, social media, everything is financial literacy, everything is trust, put in trust. So the first express trust called Unum Sanctum was developed by the Catholic Church. And Unum Sanctum said, hey, you know what? All the world's land and all the world's souls are ours. And the papal bull is locked in the vaults of the Vatican. Locked in the vaults of the Vatican. And it says, we own the world. Right? So you might say, man, fuck them. They don't own nothing. Hang on. So they feel that they have the claim of right on the whole world. And I'm going to tell you right now, I ain't even going to give you no suspense. They own it. They got it. And you can look it up as soon as you're done watching this. So they have a claim of right, and that's because in 325 AD, same year as the Council of Nicaea, Constantine the Great told Pope Sylvester that Jesus gave Peter, who was his apostle, the kingdom of the world. He gave it to St. Peter. The whole world is yours. I'm giving it to you. Right? St. Peter, therefore, owned the world. So Jesus gave St. Peter the world. And the Catholic Church says, well, St. Peter is our apostle. He owned the world, so we inherited. We have the right to claim because we are a leading organization in the business of Jesus. Jesus gave it to St. Peter. St. Peter is one of ours. Now it's ours, right? So this is the reason we pay taxes to this day. This is what I'm telling you about how Rome never fell and Caesar is the Pope, metaphorically speaking. And then once I learned this, boom, I went back to when I was a kid when I heard my teacher read, give Caesar what is his and the church what is theirs. I'm like, what the fuck? The Catholic Church owns the world. We pay taxes because of them. So of course they would have that in the Bible, right? So in the Catholic Church, we have the Pope that we know, but there's really three popes. The white Pope is the one we know, the black Pope and the gray Pope, right? The black nobility families control the Vatican. These are secret families. You would never know who they are. Underneath that, you have the Queen, then you have the Zionists, then you have the Freemasons. That's the chain of command as far as the global elite. The families on top, you'll never know who they really are. And they're probably not human, to keep it a buck. David Icke, you can look into him, and the reptilians. You can look into that. Again, fascinating. Doesn't matter what you believe. These people have dedicated their lives to this study, right? So, here's what I'm about to fuck you up. So, Unum Sanctum is the trust that has the whole world. But how do they execute? How do they just say, okay, we have a trust, we own everybody, we own everything? So, there's something called the papal tiara, right? And there's 3 crowns on the tiara, right? I'm going to have a photo here in a minute so you check it out. So the 3 crowns represent the 3 trusts. And there's 3 trusts. There's the Romanus Pontifex. That's the one who takes your real estate. So you already know the title to your land is just a right of use. You already know if you don't pay your taxes, they take it. You know that for a fact. You can't argue it. Is because of Romanus Pontifex. The second one is the Attorney AD Regis, right? This is a trust that takes your personal belongings, that you actually own nothing. That's why your items can be confiscated. As we know, even your children can be taken. And the last one, the third trust, is the convocation. Now, what's interesting about this, and you can look it up, is this trust is known as the Act 1666. So it has the 3 6s. And in Latin, these 3 trusts, each one represents the number 6. So you got 6, 6, 6. Fuck with me. Fuck with me on this. 666. And you got the 3 layers on the crown representing those trusts. So now, again, I'm giving you information that I want you to research. I don't want you to take anything at face value. But believe me, it's well researched. I'm fucking with this for over 25 years, maybe 30 years. Maybe even more than that. I don't want to age myself. Y'all know my age, goddammit. Y'all see the gray. So, when I use the word Catholic, some people might say, oh, they weren't Catholic, they were Christian missionaries. Just work with me because there's schools of thought on both sides. But another thing that I felt was bogus about the Catholic Church and how I know their intention is not godly. But again, you have unwilling participants. The missionaries that go out don't know what they're doing. Some might, the majority don't. So when the Catholic Church set out, or Christian missionaries, okay? When they set out to convert indigenous people, they ran into a group of what we call Indians, okay? Indigenous people who said, listen, I hear what you're saying, but we don't have the word sin in our language, so we're not fucking with you. So they went back and actually rewrote a Bible that omitted the word sin and said that this tribe of indigenous people killed Christ. And they were going to burn in the big fire if they didn't accept Jesus Christ and convert to Christianity. Now imagine if you vegan and you running around trying to convert people to veganism and they're like, yeah, fuck you, we don't eat meat anyway, we have no interest. Then you come back and introduce them to meat and get them addicted to meat and tell them they're vegan. That's exactly what happened here. You're trying to sell someone the notion of sin and repenting. They're saying sin don't exist, so you went and made up a sin. You accused them of something that they never did. And this is how they converted a lot of indigenous people. And you can go reference that, God Against the Indians. God Against the Indians is the book that explains this. And that's another reason why I just feel such a disingenuine vibe from the Vatican. I don't want to keep saying Catholic because that's what offends people. And I'm not talking, if you worship God, you love Jesus, it's beautiful. It literally is. But the Vatican, the City of London, and DC is something else. All right, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about the changing of the guard with the Pope, right? Because like I said, nothing moves without the Catholic Church, right? So what that means is there is no religious representation at the G Summit meetings, at the World Economic Forum, but the Pope is always there. That should tell you everything. The Pope is always there. So now you hear the Pope saying that, you know, hey, homosexual marriage, you know, who am I to judge? It's cool, you know, which again, I'm all for. But like I said, they hung their hat on Leviticus for 100 years. All the notions that homosexuality is a sin, you're going to burn in hell, you fucking fag, you fucking dyke, all that came from the church. And it came from Hollywood. No one would look at a woman, right, in the 70s and 80s and just think, wow, that's a fucking dyke. You had to hear the term somewhere. You had to see an example of what it looked like, and you had to visually see someone's disgust. Then you jumped on the bandwagon. But we were showed that. So the church did that, primarily the fucking Catholic Church, and all the little evangelicals jumped on the bandwagon and homosexuality is bad because they needed something. They needed something to rally your interest. Now the Pope is talking about priests and nuns watch porn in the Vatican. The Pope talking about abortion. If they use the embryos in the vaccine, it's okay. So you see this whole script flip going on. Then you see the agenda of the LGBTQ. And what I say agenda is the same people who had such a discern, the same people who taught you to be anti-gay are now pro-gay. The same people who built BLM up to cut them down is the same people that are pushing the LGBTQ agenda. Now, whenever you hear the term LGBTQ, you don't see two loving homosexual people in a relationship with a family. You don't see that. And this is why I don't understand why gays rally around this shit. If you are a traditional gay couple, why would you want to be associated with an organization, lack of a better term, that is really representing transgender, which is an identity gender crisis? How is that the same? And why are you not upset they're not promoting images of your life? We only see trans, kids, transition, trans. We don't see no loving gay people. None. Just trans. And they're indoctrinating the children. And they used you, gay people. They used you because less than 1% of the population is trans. So how the fuck can they gain momentum with less than 1%? They are pushing the LGBTQ agenda to children in a way that's disgusting, because autism that needed this kind of attention did not get this kind of attention. There was no outcry for autism. There was a bunch of parents that were confused, that were hurt, that were looking for answers. They were blaming the vaccine schedule, and they were being scolded like children, only for the information to come out later on. And I won't touch on autism because that's too deep for this one. I have autism in my family. A lot of people I love have autistic children. I just don't want to go there right now. But you didn't have this outcry. But yet, you have an outcry to change the sex of children, even saying we're going to override the parents. Something's not right, and this came out of nowhere, and they're planting the seed prior to birth, because that's the level that the government plays at. And when I say the government, please don't think I'm talking about politicians. They are not the government. They run nothing. Zero. And the President of the United States still answers to the Queen. Because after we beat England, because taxation without representation, so we became free, they don't tell you them motherfuckers came over here and burnt down the White House. You might have vaguely remembered that from history, but in burning down the White House, they reset the rules who the fucking boss is. We're second to the crown. And the crown answers to the Vatican. And these are facts. So I want to touch on something about technology. And I told you that in the last 100 years, we've gotten all the technology, but we also haven't really advanced. Not to the general public anyway. So this agenda of COVID and then the reset, they were going to wait until 2050 for this. But they fast forwarded because they just can't wait for humanity to catch up any longer, right? They want to unleash this. They want control of every aspect of your life, including reproduction. And I just want you to understand that Google right now, and again, please look this up, has a crystal, and this crystal acts as a computer. And it would take take the best Apple computer you can buy right now. It would take that computer 10,000 years to do what this crystal does in 1 second. In 1 second. As far as technology not advancing, the government of the United States, which in this case is the CIA, has what they call patent capture. So when you come up with some ill shit, like there's people who have come up with an electricity box about this big, and it can light up a whole city, this big. Efficient, everything. It's called a patent capture. So they capture the patent, they come knock on your door, and they let you know, hey, act up. Act up. And that's it. You pursue it, you get clapped. You leave it alone, it goes away. There's currently 5,700 patents that are captured. So my point is, they need to bring in the new world, and they don't give a fuck. And like I said, this is not the first time they've reset the world. So we're moving towards gender fluidness. I was watching a movie last night. It's a pretty good movie. Nothing about nothing. You know what I mean? In other words, no agenda. No agenda, nothing about gay, lesbian, nothing about George Floyd, BLM. No political agenda. At the very end of the movie, they said, why did you name your baby girl Jody? Because that could be boy or a girl. And in the closing fucking credits, Christina Applegate says, well, how do I know my baby's not gender fluid? Once again, that's Hollywood pre-programming. Now, my daughter's in the fashion world. Very proud of her. She got a big job in corporate America right out of high school, right out of college. And she sat down with Facebook recently. And Facebook explained to her how they have glasses that are going to have the filters on them. And also they want to work with fashion leaders, such as my daughter, to bring clothing that work in conjunction with the glasses where you can change the color. Like you can come out and be like, all right, when I see my boss, I want this suit to be black, but when I'm with my employees, I want it to be bright yellow. You can actually change that up. You could put filters on your face. You can tell the other pair of glasses how you want them to view you. It's freaky, it's futuristic, but it's right now. So my daughter's explaining to me how the clothing is moving towards gender fluid. Well, there'll be no distinction between man and woman section, right? And I already see that. I put a post the other day about pink. You know, pink is Victoria's Secret. I'm in Victoria's Secret, and I see a dude wearing pink on a poster, and I took a picture of it. And then I Googled it like, yo, does pink make men's clothes? And they said, as a company, we're moving towards gender fluid clothing. So Victoria's Secret, notorious woman's store, okay, woman's store, will now make clothes that aren't for men, but men can wear them. So we got the kids being indoctrinated. The kids now are thinking God makes mistakes. I was born a boy, but I should be a girl, right? You got people like Dwayne Wade where we don't know what's fueling their fucking madness, okay? In reference to his son-daughter getting the operation or not getting the operation. It's a freak show. But at that level of the game, what I want y'all to understand, because a lot of people are critical of Dwayne Wade, Little Boosie, myself included. But what happens when you're at that level, somewhere along the line, you were told you can do something and don't worry, it's going to be cool. And you do it, and that thing could either destroy your career or land you in prison for life. And then they blackmail you with it. Scientology does it. Hollywood does it. And I believe he's a victim of that. That's just what I want to believe, because I can't believe a father would be pushing such a young child to get a sex change operation. When you're older, do what you want. If you regret it, you regret it. But I think the kid is 12, 13, 14. It's a freak show, man. But this is where we're headed. And why? Because the future of genderless is man and woman walking down the street. There'll be no distinction. And when you meet someone and you don't know if it's a man or a woman, and you're not allowed to ask, because you may get points taken off your social credit score, not allowed to ask, and you feel an attraction, you won't really know if it's a man or a woman until you go have sex. And sex will be based only on pleasure. It won't be based on reproduction. Your social credit score will tell you if you're eligible to have a child, and designer babies will be made in a clinic. And you will go and you will design your baby and you'll have the baby in whatever way, shape, or form they're delivered at that time. And it's coming very soon. So you see how there's no need for God, why they're killing God off? Because you can't have God, you cannot have God in a society where you're telling children, well, you were born a boy, but you're really a girl, so God made a mistake. You can't have God, because then science trumps God. And if God is the Almighty, then he's the Almighty. God can't be second to Dwayne Wade and Gabby fucking Union. You understand? God cannot be second. So in the future, the genderless society where sex is just for pleasure, and then if you want a family or reproduce, it'll be based on your social credit score, just like in China, though. So if this sounds crazy, in China, there's been a rule you can only have one baby. If you have more than one, the government knocks on your door. They don't take the baby. They hit it with a bat right in front of you. They kill it on your doorstep. Boys are so desirable in China that people would have girls, then bury them in their backyard. So they had a shot of getting a boy. This is what goes on over there, okay, in communist China. So all of this has already been adopted in other parts of the world. But your social credit score will control your life. So there'll be no need for God or law because you'll be tied to blockchain. And blockchain will have all your information, your identification, your medical records, your money, your car, and if you're allowed to function in society and at what capacity based on your score. And once again, this already exists in China. Certain people commit certain infractions. They can't get on domestic flights. They can't get on the train. They can't move around. That's what's coming here. So once your money, your vehicle, your medical, your food, everything is tied to blockchain technology that can be turned on and off, there's no need for God. There's no need for fear. There's no need for control. What do they give a fuck if you break a law, right? You break a law now, you go to jail. In the future, you break a law, something gets shut off. Instantly, there's no court. There's none of that. And that's where we're headed. But I wanna break down something in closing. The City of London in closing and their connection with the Catholic Church and Washington, D.C. So, the City of London is not an independent nation like the Vatican is. The Vatican is literally a whole country. The City of London is 1 square mile. But in that square mile, that has no title, by the way, this is what's housed in that 1 square mile. The Rothschild-controlled Bank of England, Lloyd's of London, the London Stock Exchange, all British banks, branch offices of 384 foreign banks, 70 United States of America banks, Fleet Street newspaper and publishing monopolies, the headquarters of worldwide Freemasonry, and the headquarters of the money cartel known as the Crown. 1 square mile where there's no jurisdiction, there's no title to the land, nothing, houses all that. And they answer directly to the Vatican. The Vatican has many investments with the Queen. And I hope you found this shit enlightening. I've been waiting to get this off my chest uncensored for a long time. Like I said, I recorded hours and hours of material. I thought this was going to be a one and done. This will definitely be a series. But for right now, Current Affairs has presented the death of God. There will be no reason. There will be no tool. There will be no positioning. There will be no fear tactics. There will be no weaponization of God. No threats of going to hell. No promises of a better tomorrow in the afterlife. It won't be necessary. Those were all tools to control you. When they connect all of our daily life functioning to blockchain, there'll be no reason for God. On that note, I appreciate each and every one of you. Part 2, Christmas Day. Bop!